All right, welcome everybody. This feels like a high school reunion. I don't know. We're all a little bit older, a little bit bolder, but we're still breathing here. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're going to have a brisk conversation about my old friend, and we talk about old friend. David and I went to high school 40-ish years ago together.
Ouch.
And I told him this will be no high school talk. This is pure business, but we may divert around. We're excited, David, that you're here with your second book. What I'd love to do is sort of start off with actually the first line, just to frame the conversation of where we want to go. You start off your book, I mean, let's face it, expectations are a real bitch. A part of human experience that frankly I could do without. And I don't know which is worse, fulfilling them or not fulfilling them. So I want to hold that thought and we'll just come back to it. So before we go deep into what you mean by that or starting off your book, I'd love to start on your walkabout since graduating from Newman, 1982. What have you been doing since you played with Coach Fitz in basketball?
Not much. I became a transplant doctor ultimately. I met and married my beautiful wife, the love of my life. Had two great kids, developed a career in transplant, pivoted in 2016, moved back from California to here, and started chapter 2 of my life, which involves some consulting work in my field and writing books. And here I am.
So in your first book, Exhale, largely focused on your life running the Stanford Medical Center, a transplant program, remarkable. I want to get to that in a little bit. But now this new release, All That Really Matters, is a fictional novel. That's what we're told, that has a protagonist, Joe Bosco, who is hard-charging top surgeon from New Orleans, who likes to bike, likes jazz, and I heard that he was not a great basketball player either.
That's why it's not me. Because I was really good at it.
So I am asking you, what inspired you to write this story? And you know, I got to ask, are you the protagonist? Is this about you?
No. Well, first, I'm not the protagonist. I'm a much better guy than that guy is. Well, I don't know. I think that when I wrote my first book, it was nonfiction, it was a memoir. I told a lot of stories about the hospital environment, but you could only go so far. First of all, you had to stick to the truth. Second of all, you had to try not to offend folks. And it was a little bit confining in that way. I feel like with the novel, I was able to expand on some of the topics that I couldn't quite get into because of the sensitivities involved, and I could actually wander more. And so I think the novel actually went further than the nonfiction work I did. There's a lot of people, and I didn't make this up, that say that fiction is a pack of lies that tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where I was with this book.
So Joe's arrogance, or self-confidence, whatever you want to call it, is on display all throughout. That really matters. Can you share how Joe's ego and arrogance are at odds with his moral compass? How do those two things play out?
Yeah, I think he was complicated in that he had, a lot of self-confidence, a lot of arrogance, but also I think that he was doing a job that was pretty hard. And I think that, at least in my experience doing this kind of work, I don't think that you necessarily wanted someone that was having self-esteem issues as your transplant doctor. I think you did want somebody that was a little bit on the arrogant side, a little bit on the ego-driven side to instill confidence in the patients. But there's a limit to that, and I think Joe crossed that line.
So I got to ask, how do you balance that? I guess in order to be great at that job, you need to be arrogant, but you need to be a human. Or how do you balance that? And how is he tackling that?
I think the way he tried to deal with it is it was a justification in a lot of ways. And so in the novel, he justifies a lot of his behavior because, look, this is a tough job and here I am doing it and all this kind of thing. And he saw the relationships around him crumble. And he kind of then tries to get his act together. I think in real life, I saw a lot of people that informed those characters, and frankly, they never really were able to balance it. There's a lot of people in our field that do this kind of work, that look in the mirror every day and they see themselves as God, and they never figure it out. And that's why our field attracts a certain personality type.
You actually, there's a lot of conflict within the story between Joe and his wife, who both are doctors, but they chose different pursuits. Maybe talk about why you picked those two characters. And then secondarily, and you and I have talked about the role of men and women in the medical field. How does that play out in what you've observed?
Yeah, I think Joe's girlfriend in the book had a different medical path. The one thing, actually, my father told me this when I was really young. He said the great thing about medicine is you can do so many different things in the field. You can be a researcher, or you could be a clinical doctor like I turned out to be. You can work for a pharmaceutical company. You can do whatever. Joe's girlfriend in this took a completely different path. She was in it for the right reasons. She was in it for the research. She was in it to help mankind. Joe was in the field, at least initially, to help Joe. And as you'll see as the story goes on, that he reconciled some of that. But I wanted to show that sometimes there's people in the field that are in it for a completely different reason than another person would be in it. And I also think there's an incredible disparity, and I'm looking at writing a piece about this right now, between female doctors and male doctors. All kinds of information coming out that female doctors have better outcomes than male doctors, that they spend more time with their patients, that they're more empathetic. Anybody that's married probably can figure that out. But I think that there's something there, and I wanted to show that between the way men practice medicine and the way women practice medicine. And I think there's something to that.
Say more about that. I'd love to know
I'm trying to remain married, so no, I think it's not really an opinion as much as it is based on research. I mean, the best setup, if you're a female patient, the best setup for outcomes is to have a female doctor. The second best outcome, if you're a male patient, is to have a female doctor. The third best outcome is to be a man patient with a man doctor. And we can all speculate about why all these things are true, but they're true based on the research that's been done. And what I wanted to show in the book is that Joe's girlfriend took a path that was very different from his. He didn't think it was equal to his. In other words, he thought, look, I'm replacing organs. I mean, I'm this big swinging transplant doctor. Yet the work she was doing, the research that she was doing, may actually impact more people than his going one patient at a time. Which is to say that I think that we should look at the people that are caring for us and look at where they're coming from and know that there's going to be differences depending on their gender, their background, and what they're interested in, why they went into medicine in the first place.
So the title of the book, that All That Really Matters. And by the end of the book, my first question, does Joe figure it out? And what are you hoping people are taking away? Because that's a very powerful statement on the front. Did he figure it out? And what do you hope people take away from that?
I think he did. I think he did figure that out. And I think that one thing about doing the transplant kind of work is that it's very crystallizing. People are in life and death situations, and they figure out and they actually tell us the things that really matter and the things that really don't matter. And so that was part of the education that I got in real life. But in Joe's instance, he thought that what really mattered to him was fame and fortune and everybody thinking he was great and all this kind of stuff. And it turned out that did nothing for him. And so I can't title my books. I didn't title the first one. I didn't title this one because I'm terrible at that. But at the end of the day, the publisher said, this guy was searching for all that really matters. Why don't we call it All That Really Matters? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I think the whole purpose of the book, you read the passage at the beginning about expectations. The whole purpose of the book was to demonstrate how difficult expectations are. The happiest people I've ever met are the people that have kind of reasonable expectations of their life. Those of us that have outsized expectations, that we expect everything to be perfect all the time, I've been guilty of that myself, sometimes run into trouble.
So let's go back deeper in this. I mean, in some of your past interviews, you mentioned that you asked your transplant candidates, almost 10,000 over your 20 years of your career, what they would do. They're given one last day. You're at that moment. What did you learn? What was the insight that you learned from people at the end of their life? What did you hear?
Well,
what did you learn?
It was interesting because the folks that came to see me about getting a transplant, just because they were there, I knew that they wanted to continue to live. That was pretty obvious. That's why they were there. I wanted to find out why they wanted to continue to live. And one of my mentors at Tulane Medical School used to go into the room, and instead of firing off medical questions, he would start in with personal stuff. Where'd you grow up? What'd your parents do? What do you like to do in your spare time? So I developed this question probably 20 years ago, and my nurses got really sick of me asking it. What would you do if today was your last day? And I asked nearly every patient we transplanted that. And I tell you, it was a master class. It was educational because not one of them said, gee, I wish I'd worked a few more days, or I wish I'd made more money, or I wish I'd... All of them talked about their interpersonal relationships. I'd spend my last day with my family. I'd walk in the park with my wife or my kids. I would do everything I could to foster those relationships on that last day. And so it kind of, when you hear that over and over and over, you stop thinking about all the crap that you think is important, and you start thinking about maybe they have it right. Maybe because they have that crystallizing moment that they're actually the ones that know. I don't know. They do. And I think it was probably the highlight of my career hearing those answers.
I'd like to know how much New Orleans influenced this. So you wrote this, you're born and raised in New Orleans, you moved away. Joe was from New Orleans, but tell me about what really matters. Why did did New Orleans in any way influence this? Or what about this city really matters to you?
Well, and actually my friends in Palo Alto would attest to this. I mean, they used to say, what New Orleans t-shirt are you going to wear today? Because I've never been, even though I didn't live here for 26 years after medical student, I've never been away from here. I'm always here, no matter where I am. It influences everything about me. It's in my fiber. I can't shake it if I wanted to. And Jackie can attest to this, that when we decided that the time was up in California, we had the whole map open to us. We decided that we were not going to chase another job. We were not going to work for another hospital. And so the whole map was open. Stay in California, move somewhere else. We came here. And the reason we came here, I think, is in no small part to what I just talked about, what the patients told us. It's a connectedness. It's the people in this room, that I was talking to before I got up here. That doesn't happen everywhere. It didn't happen in California as long as we were out there, as much as I liked it out there. There is nothing like this place in terms of connecting to one another. So you have a choice, I think, if you live here. You can bitch about what's wrong with it, or you can focus on what's right with it. So if you want to talk about the streets, the crime, the political leadership that's clearly challenged.
But we won't talk about that.
Let's not go into that. Or you can talk about how people are connected to one another here in ways that I think are not like the rest of America. Maybe they're like parts of Europe. I think that's the magic here. I also think there's a creativity here, whether it's with the music, the food, the architecture, whatever, maybe writers. I know you've had some of them, little-known authors like Michael Lewis and Walter Isaacson.
You have a bigger crowd, by the way.
Nice, I'll take it. I'll put that on my website. So I think, though, that creativity that can be fostered here, the connection to other people is the reason to be here. I think, again, if you want to focus on the other stuff, have at it. I think the reason to be here is for the people.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Reggie Nelly about, those, some people, those of us who are born and raised and decide to stay, and some people move away. What could you tell New Orleanians who never left? What's the world like out there? Because something is, oh my gosh, you went to New York, you went to San Francisco, you're so successful. But then there's something, we get to see New Orleans externally. I mean, back to what really matters. What's it like out there, and how'd you learn about this place?
I'm going to sit here and shit on Palo Alto, but take Palo Alto, for instance. It is really arguably one of the most beautiful places in the country. It is perfect weather all the time. It is completely organized, clean, safe, beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's highly educated, on and on and on. We left. And the reason is those are nice things to have. The weather and the education and all that stuff. Those are all great. I'm not trying to diss on that. What I am trying to say is that's not all there is. If you sort of, and I did this when I first moved back here, if you sort of cruise around New Orleans, there's more going on here in a block than are going on most places. It's very soulful. And I think what happens is you go to some of these places and they can be really nice. They're a little soulless, like there's not much going on spiritually there. And I think that was true in California, and that's why we're here.
What does home mean?
Yeah, so actually I think I end the book with a comment about home, finding home. And I think that home, to me means the connections. It doesn't mean some house. It doesn't mean, lack of crime or political leadership that's excellent and all that stuff. Home is where, the people you love are. And I think trying to find that connection to each other is where home is. And actually, because you brought it up, I think this character in this book was trying to find that throughout the whole way.
Do you think people in New Orleans know this? That
I do. I actually do. I think people here have a sense that they're more connected to one another than in most places. I think that's why a lot of New Orleanians grow up here and stay here. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of us that went away that are eventually coming back. My father used to say it even before I had a notion that I was moving back here. You'll end up back there one day. It's really common. We've all heard it. New Orleanians eventually come back. And I think it's absolutely the case. And I think they come back for the reasons I've said. They want to be connected to the community.
So this is your second book. Knowing a little bit about you, you want to be great at what you do. Is this your last book?
I hope not.
So what are you working on?
I signed a contract to write a third one, so I think I'm going to write a third one if I'm still around. It's going to be out in 2026, and how many of us are going to still be here then? Who knows?
Everybody, I think.
Yeah, everybody. Mark's back there. He's going to be here for sure. He's running with the kids all the time. I'm writing a third book right now. It's going to be literally out in 2026. I'm going to go back to nonfiction with this.
And can you explain the process? So how does one write a book? I mean, what is the
Well,
reason?
as Jackie would attest to with my ADHD, it's not that easy. It's not an official diagnosis, so I see everybody kind of sagging. It's not an official diagnosis. But I always say that I get more out of 15 minutes than most people, you know. I try to write in the morning. I do my consulting work in the afternoon. To me, I do a lot of scribbling. I don't get to the part where I'm actually typing on a computer for a while. And so with this third book, I'm actually scribbling on paper and trying to figure out what I'm going to say. And then I eventually go back and try to put it into English.
And then once you do that, you go to an editor? I mean, how?
Yeah, I work with a very good editor in New York named Claire Wachtel, who has helped me tremendously since I started, actually. She edited my first book, Exhale. She's edited this book. She's editing my third book. She's been, you know, I had a lot of mentors in medicine that helped me a lot. She's my book mentor, and I don't think I could do any of these projects without her help. She's been very important to me.
This actually wasn't on my list, but as we're talking about mentors, I guess sitting up here talking, you know, you and I have talked about Coach Fitz. Is there anything we learned about Coach Fitz in this book?
Yeah, Michael Lewis told me once at the book festival a few months ago, whenever it was a few months ago, that that Coach Fitz should have his own publishing company because of all the inspiration he's given people. And, you know, if you look at, all of us have mentors in our life. Some of us, I gravitated toward a lot of male mentors, my father, my medical mentors, and then there was Coach Fitz, who I think was sort of the godfather of my mentors. I think the things that, you know, he taught me, and I actually talked to him a couple days ago about this book, is about, he had his trademark saying, don't be good, be great. Mm-hmm. You know, whatever it is you try to do, try to be good at it, try to be great at it. And I think that it was that kind of discipline and trying to commit to something that a bunch of white upper middle class kids may not have had intuitively, but sometimes literally and sometimes figuratively, he beat it into us. I mean, you know, he asked a lot of us. Again, back to expectations. And I think that some of us responded well to that message. I did. I needed that when I was a kid.
So, in your mind, what is worse? Is it fulfilling the expectations, or is it not fulfilling the expectations?
I think it's almost worse fulfilling them, because I think what happens is, you know, the people that have really high expectations of themselves meet them often, and then they have to meet something else, and then they have to meet something else. And I think it does turn out to be a never-ending process a little bit. So I'm told. I don't have any personal experience with that. But I think that expectations might be what drives the world. Like when I was writing this book, the only thing that I had in mind was expectations. I mean, that's the theme of the book. And I actually think that might be the theme of everything. I mean, some of the most happy people out there are people that have sort of, well, whatever happens, happens, right? I can't say I'm one of those people, but I'm sure envious of the people that accept what is versus always thinking what might be.
So what is your advice to this group here? I mean, you know, you've had the career.
Order more wine.
Order more wine. But in terms of being there about what really matters, you know, we are part of a culture that has high expectations.
Yeah.
What's a message that you would love everyone to take from this book as well as our conversation when they're going home or drinking more of our wine, what do you want them to think about?
I want to go back to those days in the clinic. And again, I'm going to think about this for the rest of my life. When I was able to ask people that weren't just theoretically talking about these subjects, they were actually intensely focused on what would you do if today was your last day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the messages they gave me, because they just never talked about the things that most of us think about all the time. Who cut us off in traffic, who slighted us that day, who's a pain in the ass on social media, whatever. It just doesn't come up. What does come up is, I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better daughter. That came up all the time. And I just think that those folks have a message to give the rest of us. And if I can, in some small way, tiny way, turn that around and then send it out again to people that might read my stuff, then that's a good thing. But that's the message they had. I mean, really, literally not one said, gee, I wish I would have worked harder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not one.
So people should read this book if they can get that message somehow, a guidebook or some inspiration to,
I think so. I mean, I think the thing about storytelling and making up characters is that you can put the characters in situations and you see how they respond to it. Now, one thing, by reading the book, you could say, well, this guy's an arrogant pain in the ass, and whatever happens to him. Or you could say, maybe he's trying to figure out what really matters, and you can take that message away. If I can as a writer, that's what I was trying to do. Whether or not I succeeded or not is up to you guys. So.
Give me a round of applause for David. All right, David, well, we have some books. Books are for sale. If you'd like to get a book signed, talk to David. But once again, give me a round of applause for David. Thank you very much.